We're on 25:12. The most holy plenitude of the seven sacraments decreased in Protestantism to one or two. In fact, there are some modern Protestants who do not even admit one sacrament of baptism, the one sacrament of baptism as a sacrament. Furthermore, Protestantism took a great deal out of the sanctity of the sacraments, teaching that through the sacraments, the new law of grace is not conferred ex opere operato. As I said, they're merely faith exciters, so it helps you to excite this act of faith. Oddly, the Lutherans still baptize infants. That's where you get the Anabaptists, who became the Baptists. Ana in Greek means again. So they thought the Lutherans were too Catholic. So those were the Anabaptists. And then there was a group founded by Jacob Amann. I think it's I don't know if it's a K or A-A-M. No, in Switzerland. I think it's two A's there. Jacob Amann, I think that's the correct spelling. He thought that the Anabaptists were too Catholic. So they became the Amish. Some say Amish, most say Amish. But according to normal English pronunciation, it should be Amish because if it's sitting in its own syllable, it's long as a rule. So it should be Amish, but however you want to say it, I don't care. But they won't be far away from us, right? The horse and buggy group. And they have various, they have like Novus Ordo Amish, and they do various observances and whatnot. But everything is a faith exciter. All justification, the whole religion is interior. All worship is interior. So all their liturgy is faith-exciting liturgy. The sermon, the hymns, and everything. Same as Novus Ordo. Unfortunately, neither the sermons nor the hymns in the Novus Ordo excite any faith. They mostly excite disgust. Protestantism, against the most ancient consensus of the Church, is accustomed to detest the holy sacrifice of the Mass as papist idolatry and an impious fable. In Germany, England, and Holland, there was for a long time a hatred of the Mass. England was terrible for that. The book of Luther entitled The Private Mass proves this, as well as Calvin's institutions. Article 31 of the Anglican Church and the sermons of John Knox. He was the founder of Presbyterianism in Scotland. Presbyterians, you see, the Anglican Church was Episcopal. That's why it's called the Episcopal Church in this country. They still retained bishops. Well, that's no good. So the more, let's say, the lower, the more Protestant, because they thought this is too Catholic to have bishops. They were Presbyterians, presbyter meaning priest, but they didn't, so they had only priests, presbyters, elders. That's the same thing in English, elder, someone who's older. And that's the Presbyterian Church, which is very big in this country. And then because the Anglicans got too rationalist in the 18th century, John Wesley founded something called Methodism, 1750s area. Which is it was the problem of Protestantism all over Europe was that it became very rationalistic. And so there was this pietistic Protestantism that came through in Prussia too. Pietists, and it was a revivalist kind of thing. Now this is the typical, they are the biggest Protestant sect in the United States, the Methodists. They are pure mainstream Protestantism, which is a dying religion. The only Protestants that have any hope of surviving are the very fundamentalist types. Evangelicals, they call them. People who believe in God. They are actually gaining members, but these big mainstream Protestant churches are going right down. There's nothing in them. So the sanctity of the hierarchy as an institution, for we are not speaking here about persons, we're not talking about bad hierarchs, has been taken out of Protestantism by defect of ordination, which they omitted, or essentially corrupted by defect. So they invalidated the sacrament of holy orders, or they just did away with it. They have ordinations, but that simply means that the Methodist or Presbyterian or Anglican church, quote unquote, approves you to be a minister in their function. That's all. So you're an ordained minister, like that Protestant man that fixed my machine. He said, my son was ordained. I think that just means we empower you to lead the people in prayer. That's all it means. So they corrupted that, or they omitted it. It sounds like the Novus Ordo, by a defect of mission, because the reformers, having spurned the Roman pontiff, provided no title of their own authority. Right, so they had no mission. Mission means authority. You're sent by someone, just as an ambassador has a mission. So he has authority in as much as he has a mission. Right. And by defect of ministration, because they neither do sacred things, nor do they govern the people of God by an authority received from God. Sounds like the Novus Ordo. Liturgy accompanies the sacraments, the sacrifice, and the hierarchy. But all these things have very nearly perished in Protestantism. Therefore, the sanctity of the liturgy has not remained. Again, sounds like the Novus Ordo. Having overturned the order of things, the reformers spurned the saying of Aegidius of Viterbo, "It is permitted that men be changed by sacred things, but not that sacred things be changed by men." Sounds like the Novus Ordo. So, argument 3, by reason of the members, neither the founders of Protestantism were holy, nor its fruits. Therefore, by reason of the members, it cannot be said to be holy. Proof of the antecedent. The principal authors were Luther, a truculent, prideful, abusive man, an adulterator of the sacred books, a transgressor of his vows, someone who indulged excessively in the drink, had contempt for authority, a rabble-rouser, ever unabashed to pronounce any insult or filthy statement. So if you read some of the things that he said, you have to cover your ears. Let me read you his quotes. This is from Modern Errors. Some of you may have heard these already. It's odd. What is it? I took the wrong. This is the wrong Modern Errors. is the philosophical modern. Well, I'll read those to you tomorrow. Calvin, a frigid, biting, and cruel man, an arrogant defender of his own infallibility, and with contempt for the ancient fathers of the Church, sounds like Bergoglio, gave this tribute to Luther. We testify that we consider him to be an excellent apostle of Christ. Henry VIII was an adulterer and a murderer, 6 wives. I think he put 2 of them to death, 4 of them to death. I think so. I think 2 died natural deaths, I think. Elizabeth was the perfect image of her father Henry. Elizabeth was an absolute, just horrid person. Again, it's like reading a steamy novel to read about her life. But not only that, but her approval of piratism, raiding the Spanish galleons, under some pretext of a war. But it was all pirates. I mean, they were Raleigh and Drake and all. They were pirates, and she approved. I mean, this was unabashed approval. This was not some sort of secret thing. Unabashed approval of raiding the Spanish trade between the New World and Spain, and sinking ships and taking their treasure and so forth. Yes.
In Puerto Rico, Francis Drake, under her approval, burned one of the national archives of the time.
Yes.
It took almost 100 years to be able to get back to order.
Yes. Now, the British have a long history of cruelty and anti-Catholicism and brutality. They do. When they took over St. Augustine, which they had for a short time, they went and burned all the Franciscan missions along the Suwannee River, which goes down from basically near St. Augustine into the Gulf of Mexico. So there was a string of Franciscan missions. They burned them all. Then Spain got it back. Then they sold it to us in 1821. So anyway, but Elizabeth was just the most evil. She was bold. I don't know if you know that. Yeah, wicked. And, she was, the state of Virginia is named for the Virgin Queen. Okay, so let's say that was maybe wishful thinking, all right? She was no virgin. She had a boyfriend much younger than herself. It was horrible. So that was Elizabeth. She also murdered Mary, Queen of Scots, who was the rightful heir to the throne. That's why she murdered her. And the proof that she was the rightful heir to the throne is the fact that her son became the King of England when Elizabeth died. So B, Protestantism has not borne the fruits of holiness. Luther said, the world becomes worse and worse every day. For now we see the people becoming more infamous, more avaricious, more unmerciful, more unchaste, and in every way worse than they were under popery. Melanchthon said, the world is full of crime and rage and loves flattery more than the former age. A clear contempt for religion is growing. In this time of our ancestors, there was not so much gluttony as there is now, growing more and more among men. Therefore wars come, uncontrolled developments, and other great calamities, because all are very eager to obtain unbridled liberty and infinite license for all of their desires. Yes.
Now that we have climate change, it's all worse.
Yes. Erasmus, I know that nowhere has there been more lust, more acts of adultery, than among the evangelicals. You see, that was the Lutherans. See, that's their actual correct name, or, official name. Evangelisch. In Germany, they're the Evangelisch. They're not really called Lutherans. They're called Lutherans in this country. But they're evangelicals because they stick to the gospel. You see, unlike us, who made up a whole bunch of things that are not in the gospel, even though Luther adulterated sacred scripture. So they're the Evangelisch. For this is the name by which they want to be called. Did not Luther say that he prefers the former kingdom of the Pope and monks than this kind of people who rush into the life of the Sogdians under the pretext of the gospel? Did not Melanchthon deplore the same thing in his letters to me? Did not Echo Lampadius, another reformer, say the same to me in my conversation with him? Ever since they took away so many things, the things have not improved. Now Erasmus he never went over to the heresy, but he should have. I mean, all of his disposition was toward the heresy, but he sort of knew better than to become a heretic. He never said, he was an ordained priest, he never said the breviary either. These were the beginnings of the Reformation. With merit, Dietrich, a Protestant, wrote at the same time, this cyclopic savagery increases everywhere. It is clear that the Protestant doctrine led to such great corruption. It eventually led to the 30 Years' War, which was one of the most savage wars ever fought in Europe per capita, and for the size of the population and the armies involved, probably more than World War I. In comparison. Very savage war. 30 years. As a matter of fact, some call 1914 to 1945 the second 30 Years' War, because it never really ended. Benedict XV said that Treaty of Versailles is just going to bring on another war. That was 1919 that he said that. He said all of that stuff. He saw that it was just going to cause a lot of trouble. So, furthermore, the holiness of Protestantism was never manifested by the true indicators of supernatural life. There is lacking to it the heroic virtue of the saints. You can't be a saint if you're always in sin. See, there's no idea of spiritual perfection. All you do is believe, and then you're fine. So that leads them to look at this world a great deal. In other words, to be concerned about their worldly lives, because their supernatural lives are all set. Their supernatural lives. In other words, they have a reservation in heaven. Everything is fine that way. So there is no tending to the supernatural order. So that's why you have the rise of commercialism in the Protestant countries. A great deal. Holland, England, particularly. Everything is commerce. And also the end of any kind of ecclesiastical art and architecture. The buildings that were put up in England under Protestantism, with one exception of St. Paul's in London, I'll give them that. That's pretty nice, all right? But the rest are just, they look like Independence Hall. That's nice. But everything is leveled by Protestantism. There is no aspiration to anything supernatural or high. It's all leveled. Whereas in Catholic countries, that still continues. All the Baroque architecture and all of the energy of art, sacred art and sacred architecture. and even in secular architecture, palaces and all, an idea of beauty and splendor that just doesn't exist in those Protestant countries. I mean, Holland, my goodness, it looks like New Jersey. Well, excuse me. Well, I mean, it's just some ordinary place. There's nothing of. Let's say it looks like Rhode Island. I mean, it's you drive around, you don't know that you're in Europe. When you drive around other like Catholic countries of Europe, look at this, look at that. It's some sort of landmark of magnificence, usually religious, and. Right. That's all I could think of. Was this? Did we get off on the right plane? Or I mean, this plane did it go to Newark, New Jersey, or did it go to Amsterdam? You get off, and there's nothing that would impress you in Holland, because it was founded as a Protestant country. It broke from Spain. It revolted against Spain and became the Protestant country, and persecuted the Catholics terribly. And so and then, you get its art, Rembrandt, everything is flat. A lot of people like Rembrandt. I can't stand him. But everything is dull and flat and uninteresting. The country's flat. All of its architecture is flat. Hope nobody from Holland is listening to this. You might want to cut this out. But it's true. The Scandinavian countries, there's nothing in them to see. It's all just this world. See? But a lot of attention to comforts of this world. This country as well. There are a few nice Catholic churches, but there's here and there a decent Protestant church. But most of the time, those are just halls, and some of them are so ugly. They're just meeting halls. And so this country was also very much bent on commerce. So everything is commerce and business in this country, and that's what we're known for. See, so it is a Protestant country, and that's what Protestantism did, and England too. The things that you go to England to see are the Catholic cathedrals, now Protestant, but the magnificent Catholic cathedrals. But then that stops, and then you go and see the beautiful homes that the people built with all the money that they made off of their empire and various other commercial enterprises. You go to the big houses, like, Downton Abbey kind of thing. That's, those incredibly expensive places. Because that's everything is shifted to this world, because Protestantism kills off the idea of tending toward the supernatural order. There is no supernatural order. You are a sinner, and your sins are covered up, so you don't have to worry about it. The toll is paid. So don't worry, just move ahead. That's the mentality of Protestantism. When you look at Canada, you look at French Canada, again, these hamlets, these tiny villages with a beautiful church. It's pretty flat by the St. Lawrence River. You just see them, all these steeples, and in the countryside, magnificent churches. And then you go into English Canada. I won't tell you what that looks like. But you go into Ontario, there's nothing. It looks like Michigan. It does. You don't know that you've crossed the border, really. It looks like Michigan. It's flat, uninteresting, and dull. Hope nobody from Michigan is listening to this. But no, and by that I mean that there's nothing uplifting about it. It's all this world. See, so that's what, getting back to the point, that Protestantism ruined sanctity. You're in sin. Your soul is full of sin. You're a sinner. But the merits of Christ cover you up. That's the mentality. So get out and sell something. Whereas the Catholic countries had a more supernatural view and were less commercialized. Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, Catholic Germany, less. I mean, they did well. France was the richest country in the 18th century. France beat out everybody as far as commerce and riches and income and so forth. They had the biggest gross domestic product in the 18th century, France. So, I mean, they were not slouches with regard to commerce, etc., but they never lost that Catholic sense of the supernatural. But England lost it completely. So that's just a little. So Protestantism ruined sanctity. Even the very idea of sanctity was impossible for them. So there is lacking to it the heroic virtue of the saints. There's no saints, there's no monks, there's no idea of getting perfect. The evangelical councils are not observed, not at all. All right? No religious orders flourish in it. They're gone. So monasteries and all of the magnificence that comes out of the monasteries, the chant, all of the beautiful things that monasteries produce, gone. It is not conspicuous by the heroism of charity, of the apostolate, of penance, or of abnegation. All Christian virtues. Their missions are not outstanding by the fruits of heroic virtues, and they were late in the missionary, in founding missions. The Catholic Church was always extremely active in missionary work. They were very lackadaisical. In the 19th century, they finally got going a little bit. Either of those who preach or of those who relinquish their errors, nor by a true army of martyrs. All right, so there were some Protestant quote-unquote martyrs, but not many. Usually they claim as martyrs the ones that were put to death by the Catholics. All right. Mary Tudor put to death 283 Protestants in England during her reign. And don't forget, these were people that, they think, oh, how terrible. These were people who were making a lot of trouble and who wanted to transform England into a Protestant country. And she understood that. No miracles, finally, are seen in Protestantism, nor is there any hope of miracles. Luther said, from us who deny free will, one ought not to require miracles. So, Calvin said to the King of France, those who ask miracles from us do so perversely. Erasmus affirms, not one of them as yet exists who could even cure a lame horse. In the present day, the charism of miracles appears no more than it did at the time of Erasmus. All right. Catholicity does not pertain to the Protestant churches. Catholicity is that property of the church by which, both conspicuously numerous and everywhere one, it flows out to nearly all the ends of the earth. Therefore, Protestantism is not marked by Catholicity. Proof of the minor. Protestantism is not one, as we have proven above, nor is it Catholic either. So if you lack unity, you must lack also Catholicity, because it is one thing to many. Universal means one, unum versus alia, one toward other things. That's the, nor does the mark of Catholicity appear formally either in its extension or its expansion. Protestantism is rather conspicuous by number and extension, but in such a way that the Protestant groups, of whom there are more than 200, are far inferior in numbers to the Catholics. Now, but that material extension is in no way marked by the sign of Catholicity, which pertains by the will of Christ to his church. For one, it was first propagated in Europe chiefly by sword and fire, and in a manner which was too human. So mostly by the pressure of monarchs and dukes and various other local potentates. That's how Scandinavia went. When they saw that they could be free from the influence of the Pope and all that, and they could be the heads of their own churches, like the Swedish Lutheran Church, right? They persecuted Catholics, and so there was pressure coming on down from the monarch to be a Protestant. The same was true in Germany. The same was true in England, we know. So people went along. Soon it became divided up, not as an expansion of a single group of faithful, but became a cohabitation of opposing doctrines under one roof of non-Catholicism. So the one thing that they are united on is that they hate the Catholic Church. They all hate the Catholic Church. 3, the work of the missions, although it had not even thought of propagating the name of Christ among the pagans for 130 years, was first undertaken by a certain John Eliot in the North American colonies in 1646. Excuse me. Afterwards, the work of the missions had relatively small results. In more recent times, Protestantism has had a greater success, but in general not greater in either quality or quantity than what can be obtained by force and dependence. You see, that means colonies. See, so if you're, the British Empire, you get places if you become Church of England. You see, it helps to be Church of England, not a Catholic in the British Empire. See, so there was a tendency to. It's something like what happened under Constantine, where a lot of people became Catholics because Constantine was a Catholic, you see, and he favored the church and all this. So the level of the church, although these people professed the faith and became Catholics, the fervor of the church declined in the 4th century. One of the reasons for Arianism was the fervor declined. Under the persecutions, it was very strong. Whenever persecution comes, you find out how many really believe and how many don't really believe. A lot of people can profess, they can say, yeah, I'm Catholic, I'm baptized Catholic, they even go to Mass and everything. But when the pressure comes, you really find out. As a general rule, historically, the population will follow the authority. As a general rule. Greek schismatics, Protestants, and there'll be some that don't. Not many. And the problem in the Novus Ordo is it's not some secular ruler. You have the very center of authority itself that is promulgating what you should think and do and to be a Catholic. So that's why it's almost universal. The corruption of faith is practically universal. It's a handful of people, less than 1/10 of 1%. All right. That's because the Catholic Church works on authority religious authority. That's its operating system, you might say. So if the religious authority says be Novus Ordo, then everyone becomes Novus Ordo, thinking that they're real good Catholics. So both within the missions and outside of them, those principles which dissolve Catholicity, that is, which corrode an organization which is everywhere one, adhere to the essence of Protestantism as such. See, so their doctrinal disunity that is necessarily a part of Protestantism. It's not a defect, it's necessarily a part of Protestantism. The disunity of doctrine, disunity of hierarchy or non-existence of hierarchy, disunity of liturgical practices. And the Anglicans have some sort of notion of a Eucharistic, not sacrifice, but service. And some others do. The Lutherans too. Others say no. Baptism, you can't get baptized by the Anabaptists unless you're 12 or something like that. The Salvation Army says you can get baptized if you want, but we don't insist on it. That idea of free examination of the scriptures causes a total disunity of all of the aspects of religion. Each person is, in a way, his own infallible pope. And they come together only on certain things, that if they're like-minded, usually something to do with their national background. If they're like-minded, the Dutch Reformed Church, for example. They were Dutch. That was big in New York because it was New Amsterdam. The town that I came from is called Flushing, which there was a lot of jokes about that. That was the English name for a Dutch town called, it looks like Vlissing. It's on the coast of Holland. And the English couldn't pronounce that, so they call it Flushing. So the Dutch, when the Dutch had it, it was Vlissing, but then the English changed it to Flushing. So that's where I came from. As I said, there was a lot of... We didn't think anything of it when growing up, but then when you told somebody you were from Flushing, well, the jokes came. So, but you see remnants of the Dutch presence in then New Amsterdam. There's a lot of... you see up the Hudson River, like for example, the word kill, which doesn't mean kill, it means something in Dutch. I can't remember what it means. But there's a lot of that. There's Rensselaer, there's Dutch names all the way up the Hudson River that are still around. So, that's a little footnote anyway. Argument 2, Protestantism, which Erhard rightly observes, from the beginning up to the present day is moved under the sign of revolution. A bold contemner, that means despiser of traditional things, eager for new things more than is due. It is also moved under the sign of extreme subjectivism, by which it happens that the systems of individuals, more than the truth of Christ, given objectively, is propagated among the various peoples. See, so Protestantism has a spirit of revolt in it because it's individualistic. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. It's libertine by its very nature. It moves under the sign of nationalism and national churches, not in this country though, in which would be found only fractions and fragments of Christianity. It moves under the sign of defection and apostasy from the essence of the Christian religion as it is a supernatural religion, in such a way that the preaching of the gospel has become the propagation of rationalism and naturalism. That is very true in the mainstream Protestant churches. Protestantism, therefore, by its very nature, is not Catholic, but is the denial of the mark of Catholicity. All right. Apostolicity does not pertain to the Protestant churches. The church is called apostolic if it continues, A, through the legitimate succession of pastors, B, never interrupted from the time of the apostles, C, in the identity of doctrine, sacraments, and government. But none of these things is seen in Protestantism. Therefore, this religion cannot be considered apostolic. So those are the three elements of apostolicity there. See, that never interrupted from the time of the apostles. That's very important for today's consideration. You have to have legitimate succession uninterrupted from the time of the apostles to the end of the world. Uninterrupted. That's the reason for what we call the thesis. That has to be preserved. Somehow your explanation must preserve that. Whatever you cook up for your explanation of the present crisis in the church must include that. Uninterrupted from the time of the apostles to the end of the world. Succession. All right. Just to let you know, if you, as I always say, if you can come up with something better, we're listening. Okay, so, but don't come up with we're going to have a conclave or some dumb thing like that, or there's going to be a big explosion in the sky or something. So for the legitimate succession of pastors is required valid ordination, and 2, a legitimate mission from those who have succeeded to the apostles. Well, you say, well, that you have neither of those things in the thesis, but you do still have the legitimacy of election. You do still have that in that model. So they are in the position of receiving a legitimate mission, and they could be validly ordained. See, they're in what we call the ultimate disposition of authority, or to authority. Whereas somebody who is an Anglican or a Greek Orthodox is not in the ultimate disposition to receive authority, because his election, his choice, is not from a legitimate body or a legitimate something that has the power to elect and designate. That's the difference. Now, you say, well, nobody ever spoke about that. Yes, no one ever thought that this would take place in the Catholic Church. That's why you can page through a lot of books and they're not going to say what I just said. But it's still nonetheless verifiable. And as I always say, if you don't require an abjuration from returning Novus Ordites and a lifting of the excommunication, you are implicitly agreeing with this. Because if they are in the same condition as Protestantism or Greek Orthodox, you would have to do both of those things. That is, if they are materially detached from the Catholic Church as a separate sect, like Greek Orthodox, like Anglicans, then you would have to do those things in order to reconcile Novus Ordites. No one that I know does that. So, But neither of these things is found in Protestantism, therefore it is not apostolic. In general, there is not even the shadow of a valid ordination. The validity of orders, however, in the Anglican Church or established church, even if they had not supplied absolutely firm reasons for denying it, would be able to help only a few members, namely of the established church. All right, so they, as you know, claimed valid orders, but then that was quashed by Apostolicity in 1896. Distinguish, those of you who may not know English, and perhaps some of you that do, the difference between squash and quash. This refers to something physical. You squash an insect. Quash has to do with something more abstract. You quash an idea. See, or the idea of their, you don't squash an idea, you quash it. All right. They're close. But one is more abstract, this is more physical. You squash something that's going to, all right? You squash a squirrel as you drive by on the road. But then, because they corrupted the form, they reduced it to a non-sacrificing priesthood. That's why the word presbyter, which was at least in the English Novus Ordo, was being used. I think that they have abandoned this in their rite, was being used. That was invented by Anglican divines to indicate a non-sacrificing priest. In English. In Latin, it works beautifully. But in English, it is a non-sacrificing priest. But I notice in their ordination rites, they're talking about priests now, so that they may have gotten gotten some Catholicism in them. All right.